I remember the bus ride like it was yesterday, even though it feels like a lifetime ago. The rumble of the engine was a low drone beneath a cacophony of teenage chatter and bad pop music leaking from someone's headphones. We were on our way to the annual senior class outdoor education trip, an event meant to foster team building and leadership skills. Code for a week of forced marches, lukewarm food, and questionable hygiene in shared cabins. For most, it was a chance to escape parents and make out in the woods. For me, Leo, it was a fresh wave of social anxiety wrapped in a thin veneer of academic obligation. I usually blended into the background, a ghost in the hallways, perfectly content with my books and my quiet corners. But on trips like this, blending in felt like an active effort, a constant performance. I'd tried to snag a seat next to Mark, my only real friend, but he'd been shanghaied by the rugby team a few rows ahead, dragged into a boisterous game of Would You Rather. So I was alone, pressed against the window, watching the city blur into suburban sprawl, then into endless green fields. My backpack was crammed with emergency snacks, a well-worn copy of Dune, and enough layers to survive an Arctic expedition, just in case the rustic cabins lived up to their name. Then he sat down. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The shift in the air, the faint scent of something clean and outdoorsy, like fresh rain and a hint of mint toothpaste. It was unmistakable. Cameron. My internal alarm bells, usually a gentle hum, ratcheted up to a frantic siren. Cameron Evans. The name itself felt like a punch to the gut, or maybe a soft brush of fingers across my spine, depending on the day. He was, to put it mildly, everything I wasn't. Star athlete, effortlessly popular, quick wit, and a smile that could disarm angry teachers and charm grandmothers alike. He moved with a kind of casual grace that made even walking down the hall look like an art form. He was also devastatingly handsome in that classic all-American way. Sandy blonde hair that always seemed to fall perfectly, eyes the color of a summer sky, and a smattering of freckles across his nose that somehow made him seem both approachable and impossibly distant. And he was straight, or at least as far as everyone knew. He'd dated a string of girls, all beautiful, all popular, all perfectly aligned with his image. He was the kind of guy who had his future neatly mapped out, probably with a scholarship to some big university and a successful career waiting for him. I, on the other hand, was still trying to figure out if I preferred tea or coffee in the morning without feeling like I was making a monumental life decision. He dropped into the seat beside me, his elbow brushing mine for a fraction of a second that sent a jolt right through me. I kept my gaze fixed out the window, pretending to be utterly absorbed by a particularly interesting cow. "Hey, Leo," he said, his voice a low rumble that always sounded a little like he was laughing, even when he wasn't. "Mind if I sit here? Everywhere else is packed with jocks and drama queens having shouting matches." My throat felt like sandpaper. Yeah, sure. No, I don't mind." Smooth, Leo. Real smooth." I risked a quick glance. He was already leaning back, one arm resting casually on the top of the seat, his profile sharp against the passing landscape. He caught my eye and offered that easy, lopsided smile that always made my stomach do a complicated flip. "Thanks," he said, then pulled out his phone, his thumb already flying across the screen. He was probably texting his girlfriend, or one of his many friends, or maybe organizing some spontaneous football game. I sighed internally, a silent release of the tension that had tightened my shoulders. He was just being nice. He was always nice, in that affable, golden retriever kind of way. It meant nothing. Absolutely nothing. The rest of the bus ride was a strange exercise in forced proximity. Every slight movement, every rustle of his jacket, every shift in his weight, I was hyper-aware of it. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, even through my thick hoodie. I occasionally caught glimpses of him out of the corner of my eye. He was playing some game on his phone, then scrolling through music, occasionally letting out a quiet chuckle. I wondered what he found so funny. I wondered everything about him. It was an exhausting way to exist, constantly analyzing, constantly wondering if he could somehow sense the ridiculous depth of my secret crush. We finally pulled into the gravel drive of the Outdoor Education Center, a collection of rustic wooden cabins nestled in a dense forest. The air instantly felt crisper, smelling of pine and damp earth. A collective groan went up from the bus as the first glimpses of our accommodations became clear. These were definitely not luxury cabins. Our teachers, Mr. Harrison and Ms. Albright, were already barking instructions. "All right, listen up. Cabins are assigned by last name alphabetically. Grab your bags, find your cabin, drop your stuff, then meet back here in 20 minutes for the welcome briefing." Alphabetical. My heart did another flutter, but this time it wasn't from nerves. My last name started with M. Cameron's started with E. We'd never be in the same cabin. Relief, swift and immediate, washed over me. And then a tiny, almost imperceptible prick of disappointment. My stupid, masochistic heart. I grabbed my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and navigated the chaotic stream of students. The cabins were numbered, and I quickly located Cabin 7. Inside, it was exactly what I'd expected. 4 bunk beds, meaning 8 students per cabin. The air was already thick with the scent of old wood and the lingering smell of disinfectant. My bunk was the bottom one by the window. I tossed my bag onto it and started to unpack my emergency snacks, a vital first step. A few minutes later, Mark burst in, his face flushed with excitement. "Leo, dude, this place is awesome. Kinda gross, but awesome. Guess who I'm with?" "Who?" I asked, pulling out a slightly squashed granola bar. "Josh, Finn, and the rest of the rugby guys. It's gonna be wild." He grinned, then paused, noticing my bunk. "Wait, you're in here? What about Finn and Max?" "They're in another cabin," I clarified, feeling a pang of slight discomfort. Harrison must have messed up the list. I had assumed I'd be with my usual quiet group, but it seemed I was thrown in with a random mix. Great. Just as Mark was about to launch into a detailed account of the bus ride's Would You Rather game, the cabin door swung open again. And then the air shifted, just like on the bus. That familiar scent, that subtle change in energy. Cameron. My breath caught in my throat. He stood there, framed in the doorway, a duffel bag casually slung over one shoulder. His eyes, those piercing blue eyes, swept over the cabin, then landed on me. His expression was unreadable for a moment, then that familiar, easy smile spread across his face. "Hey, Leo," he said, his voice as warm as sunshine. "Looks like we're cabin mates." My jaw must have been hanging open, because Mark nudged me with his elbow. "Dude, close your mouth. You'll catch flies." I managed a weak, "Hey, Cameron." My mind was racing, trying to process this information. Alphabetical? How could this be? My brain, in its heightened state of panic, scrambled for answers. Maybe they'd changed the system last minute. Maybe there were too many M's. Maybe the universe had a cruel sense of humor and decided to throw me into the deep end. Cameron walked further into the cabin, scanning the available bunks. 2 were already claimed by guys I vaguely knew from class, both fairly innocuous. He picked the top bunk directly above mine. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo. The universe wasn't just being cruel, it was being downright theatrical. "Guess I'm top bunk," he said, tossing his duffel onto the mattress with a soft thud. "You got the window? Nice." Mark, ever the social butterfly, stepped forward. "Hey, Cameron, didn't know you were in this cabin. I'm Mark. You guys know each other?" "Yeah, we're in history together," Cameron replied, already pulling out a neatly folded sweatshirt. He even unpacked efficiently. Of course he did. Leo's usually glued to his textbooks, probably knows more than Harrison does. He grinned at me, and I felt a blush creep up my neck. It wasn't a mean comment, but it was a little too close to the truth, a little too observant. Well, I mumbled, feeling incredibly awkward. "Just trying to pass the class." Mark, oblivious to my inner turmoil, was already recounting his bus journey. I half listened, my awareness split between Mark's chatter and Cameron's movements above me. He was humming a low tune, a popular song I recognized, His presence filled the cabin, making the already small space feel even smaller, more charged. The welcome briefing was a blur. Mr. Harrison, a perpetually cheerful history teacher, outlined the week's activities: canoeing, orienteering, a ropes course, and a dreadful-sounding talent show, all designed to make us connect. I spent most of the briefing trying not to make eye contact with Cameron, who was standing a few feet away, laughing easily with some of the other popular guys. He looked so comfortable, so at home in his own skin, while I felt like I was wearing someone else's, 2 sizes too small. Dinner was a communal affair in a large mess hall: bland pasta, watery sauce, and suspiciously spongy bread. I sat with Mark and the random guys from our cabin: Liam, who was obsessed with video games, and Ben, a quiet art student. Cameron was at a table across the room, surrounded by his usual crowd, roaring with laughter at some joke I couldn't hear. I watched him surreptitiously, a habit I hated but couldn't break. The way his hair fell across his forehead when he leaned forward, the expressiveness of his hands when he talked, the flash of white teeth when he smiled. Every detail was etched into my memory. Later that evening, after a surprisingly brutal scavenger hunt in the woods that left me muddy and slightly bruised, we finally returned to the cabin. The air was colder now, the sun having dipped below the tree line, casting long, eerie shadows. Liam and Ben were already on their phones, earphones in, lost in their own worlds. Cameron was sitting on his bed, top bunk, leaning against the wall, reading. A physical book. That surprised me. I'd expected a tablet or a gaming device. "What are you reading?" I asked, before I could stop myself. My voice sounded oddly loud in the quiet cabin. He looked down, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, then a slight smile. "Oh, hey, just a sci-fi novel. My dad recommended it. You ever read Neil Stephenson?" A little," I admitted, feeling a rush of warmth that he was actually engaging with me. "Snow Crash?" "That's the one." His eyes lit up. "It's pretty wild, right? A lot to unpack." We talked for a few minutes about books, about classes, about how ridiculously cold the cabin was getting. It was a mundane conversation, but for me, it felt like walking on a tightrope over a canyon. Every word was carefully chosen, every inflection analyzed. I was acutely aware of the space between us, the bunk bed separating my world from his, but also the thread of shared interest connecting us. He seemed genuinely engaged, not just being polite. This was new. Usually, our interactions were limited to polite nods in the hallway or a quick exchange in class. As the night wore on, the cabin grew colder. The heating, if there was any, seemed to be on a sabbatical. I shivered under my thin sleeping bag, regretting not bringing a warmer one. Liam and Ben were asleep, their soft snores filling the silence. Above me, I could hear Cameron shifting, the creak of his mattress. I imagined him huddled under his covers, maybe still awake, maybe reading with a flashlight. The thought was both comforting and agonizing. I tossed and turned, unable to find a comfortable position. My mind was a carousel of thoughts: the day's events, tomorrow's activities, and, inevitably, Cameron. His smile. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. His casual friendliness. It was a torment. This secret adoration. This unspoken yearning that felt too big for my chest. A soft thud jolted me awake. I must have drifted off. I opened my eyes, disoriented, and saw a shadow detach itself from the top bunk. My heart pounded. What was that? Was someone leaving? Then a quiet whisper, barely audible above my own ragged breathing. "Leo?" It was Cameron. He was standing beside my bunk, a dim silhouette in the darkness of the cabin. My heart leaped into my throat. "Yeah?" I whispered back, my voice hoarse with sleep and surprise. "Sorry," he murmured, his voice closer now, a soft exhalation of air. I can't sleep. It's freezing up there." He was referring to the cold. Of course. What else could it be? He was probably just uncomfortable, looking for a warmer spot. "Yeah, it's pretty bad," I agreed, pulling my thin sleeping bag tighter around me, as if that would somehow make me less visible. less vulnerable. A moment of silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken things. I could feel his presence, a solid, warm anchor in the frigid air. Then, to my utter astonishment, he moved. Slowly, carefully, he lifted the edge of my sleeping bag. "Mind if I just down here for a bit?" he whispered. "Just to warm up. I promise I won't kick you." My mind blanked. He wanted to get into my bed? The same bed I was currently occupying? My internal siren was now blaring, smoke probably pouring from my ears. This was beyond anything my wildest fantasies had ever dared to conjure. This was illogical. This was impossible. This was happening. My voice, when it came out, was barely a squeak. Sure. Yeah." He slipped in, a surprisingly quiet and graceful movement. The sudden influx of warmth was immediate, startling. He was wearing sweatpants and a long-sleeved shirt, and even through the fabric of my sleeping bag, I could feel the heat radiating from his body. He lay on his side, facing away from me, his back a warm, solid wall against my front. He took up a surprising amount of space, and suddenly my tiny bunk felt even smaller, every inch of it occupied. My entire body went rigid. I was acutely aware of everything: the subtle rise and fall of his chest as he breathed, the faint smell of his shampoo, the warmth of his leg brushing against mine through the sleeping bag. My mind was a whirlwind of frantic thoughts. What is happening? Is this really happening? This is forbidden. This is so, so forbidden. Not in the sense of a school rule, necessarily, but in the sense of my own deeply buried desires, my hidden identity. The unspoken rules of our world, our school, our lives. Boys didn't just crawl into other boys' beds, not like this, not unless it meant something. And if it meant something, it was dangerous. It was terrifying. I lay there, frozen, hardly daring to breathe. Every nerve ending in my body was alight. The silence in the cabin was punctuated only by the soft snores of Liam and Ben and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I wondered if he could hear it, this frantic drumbeat against his back. After what felt like an eternity, he shifted slightly. "Thanks, Leo," he whispered, his voice soft, sleep-laced. "It's actually warm down here." "No problem," I managed to croak out, my voice still sounding foreign to my own ears. He didn't move any further away. If anything, he pressed a little closer, seeking the warmth. I could feel the heat from his back seep through my sleeping bag, warming my front, chasing away the chill. My fear warred with a dizzying sense of exhilaration. This was an intimate act, sharing a bed, even platonically. But was it platonic? My body was screaming a resounding no. My mind, however, was in full damage control mode, trying to rationalize it, to make it innocent. It's just cold. He's just trying to get warm. That's all. But the warmth wasn't just physical. It was emotional, too. A comforting weight against me, a presence that was both startling and incredibly welcome. I closed my eyes, trying to regulate my breathing, trying to make myself invisible, even though he was right there, pressed against me. The forbidden wasn't just about the physical proximity or the fear of being discovered. It was about the sheer audacity of my own feelings, the way they surged and roared in his presence, threatening to break free. It was about the fact that I was gay, and he was straight, and this intimacy, this accidental closeness, felt like both a blessing and a curse, a fleeting glimpse of a world I craved but knew I couldn't have. I drifted into a fitful sleep, suspended between dreams and reality, Cameron's warmth a constant, anchoring presence against my back. When I woke up, the first sliver of dawn was piercing through the cabin window. The light was pale and gray, painting everything in muted tones. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then the warmth against my back, the faint scent of mint brought me crashing back to reality. Cameron was still there. He was still pressed against me, his breathing slow and even. He must have been a deep sleeper. I, on the other hand, felt like I hadn't slept at all, my mind having been on high alert all night. Slowly, carefully, I turned my head, just enough to see the back of his head, his hair slightly rumpled against the pillow. He looked so peaceful, so utterly unaware of the earthquake he had caused in my world. A wave of something akin to panic washed over me. What if someone saw? What if Liam or Ben woke up and saw us like this? The shame, the embarrassment, the endless questions. My heart began to pound again, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't just forbidden for me, it was forbidden for him too. His reputation, his straight image, everything could be shattered. I needed him to move. But I also didn't want him to move. The conflict was tearing me apart. Just as I was trying to figure out how to extricate myself, he stirred. A soft groan, a stretch. He shifted, and the warmth against my back receded. My body, used to his presence, instantly felt the cold again. He slowly sat up, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his hand. He looked disoriented for a moment. Then his eyes landed on me. A flicker of something passed through his gaze. Surprise? Embarrassment? I couldn't tell. My face felt hot. I probably looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice raspy with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my voice equally hoarse. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to tame the bedhead. "Slept pretty well, actually. Thanks for sharing your bunk. I swear it was an icebox up there." He offered a small, awkward smile. I managed a nod. "Yeah, no problem." He swung his legs out of the bunk, landing softly on the floor. He stretched, a casual display of strength and grace that made my breath catch. Then he walked over to his duffel bag, pulling out some fresh clothes. He didn't look back, didn't offer any further explanation or comment. He just went about his business, as if crawling into another guy's bed in the middle of the night was the most normal thing in the world. But it wasn't normal, not for me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that, despite his casual demeanor, it wasn't entirely normal for him either. The air between us was different now, charged with a new, fragile understanding, a secret shared under the cover of darkness. The forbidden had happened, not with grand gestures or whispered confessions, but with a silent, desperate search for warmth, an accidental intimacy that had irrevocably shifted something fundamental between us. As he headed for the communal showers, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind reeling. The memory of his warmth, his presence, was still clinging to me, a ghost limb that still felt his weight. This trip, which had started as a mundane obligation, had just become something else entirely, something terrifying, something thrilling, and I had no idea what came next. The rest of the week stretched before me, an endless expanse of unknown possibilities, all underscored by the unspoken weight of that secret night. The first thing I registered was the faint scent of stale cabin air mixed with something else, something distinctly Noah. It was on my pillow, in the thin blanket tangled around me, even on my skin. My eyes fluttered open, not quite ready to face the fluorescent strip lighting that would soon flood the room, but my brain was already racing, hitting a speed bump, then an entire wall. Noah. He was still there, right next to me. For a split second, I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the ceiling, every nerve ending screaming a silent alarm. The thin mattress dipped slightly where he lay, his back to me, an arm flung out, his dark hair a mess against the pillow. He looked so incredibly peaceful, utterly oblivious to the tornado of panic and exhilaration that was tearing through me. What had we done? The forbidden. The word echoed in my head. A heavy, suffocating blanket. It wasn't just a school rule about not being in other people's beds, though that was certainly part of it. It was bigger, deeper, a seismic shift in my own understanding of myself and the world. This wasn't just about getting caught breaking curfew. This was everything. I carefully, painstakingly shifted an inch, then another, trying to put some space between us without waking him. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo. The memory of his warmth, his skin against mine, the hushed whispers, the raw, undeniable pull that had somehow obliterated every rational thought in my head. It all came rushing back, so vivid, it felt like it was happening again right now. My face flushed hot. What had possessed me? What had possessed us? He stirred then, a soft groan escaping his lips, and my breath hitched. I froze, my eyes wide open, pretending to be asleep, even though my entire body was rigid with tension. He mumbled something unintelligible, shifted again, and then, blessedly, seemed to settle back into sleep. Okay, breathe, Cameron. Just breathe. The light was starting to peek through the gap in the cheap curtains, painting faint stripes across the opposite wall. Soon the others would be stirring. The rustle of sleeping bags, the creak of bunk beds, the groggy muttering. It would all start. And we couldn't be found like this. Not a chance in hell. My mind raced through 1,000 scenarios, each one more horrifying than the last. Myr Davies, our history teacher, with his stern, no-nonsense face. Mrs. Albright, our chaperone, with her keen eyes that missed nothing. The snickers, the whispers, the outright judgment from our classmates. My parents... Oh God, my parents. The weight of it all pressed down on me, making it hard to swallow. Carefully, so slowly I thought I might actually stop time, I began to extricate myself. My leg, which had been tangled with his, felt like lead. My arm, which had been under his head, was completely numb. I slid out from under the blanket, inch by painful inch, until I was free of his touch. The moment the contact broke, a strange mix of relief and an unsettling pang of loss hit me. Relief that I was out of immediate danger, loss for something I couldn't even name. I stood by the bed, my clothes a rumpled mess where I'd discarded them on the floor hours ago. My boxers were twisted, my t-shirt inside out. I pulled them on with clumsy, shaking hands, trying to move as quietly as possible. Noah remained oblivious, his breathing deep and even. How could he be so calm? Didn't he feel this monumental panic, this crushing sense of dread and exhilarating wonder? Once dressed, I risked a glance at him again. He was still sleeping, his face softened by slumber, a stray lock of hair falling across his forehead. He looked innocent and beautiful. The thought caught me off guard, a sharp, unwelcome stab of warmth in my chest. Beautiful. Where had that come from? I shook my head internally, trying to clear the fog. This wasn't the time for such ridiculous thoughts. This was the time for damage control. I tiptoed to my own bunk, which was diagonally opposite Noah's. It was the top bunk, and climbing into it noiselessly felt like performing a high-wire act. I managed it, somehow, pulling the scratchy wool blanket up to my chin, my heart still thudding like a trapped bird. Now to wait for the inevitable awakening, for the light of day to expose everything. The next hour was agony. I lay there, feigning sleep, listening to the cabin slowly come to life. First, the muffled coughs from a couple of bunks down. Then, the creak of someone stretching. Finally, a groan that I recognized as Finn, our resident early bird, who always had to pee the moment dawn broke. Footsteps padded across the floor, then the bathroom door clicked open and shut. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to regulate my breathing. It was almost time. A few minutes later, Finn was back. "Anyone else up?" he grumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Silence, save for a few more groans. Then a rustle from Noah's bunk. My body tensed. This was it. "Yeah, I am." Noah's voice, rough with sleep, cut through the quiet. My stomach did a backflip. His voice, the one that had whispered my name last night. It sounded so normal now, so utterly mundane. I risked a peek. He was sitting up, rubbing his eyes, looking just like any other sleepy teenager. He stretched, a long, languid movement that pulled his t-shirt tight across his torso. Then he looked around the room, his gaze sweeping over the various bunks. For a fraction of a second, his eyes met mine, and everything stopped. There was no flicker of recognition, no knowing glance, no subtle signal. His eyes passed over me, as if I was just another sleeping figure in the room, just Cameron. It was a blank slate. And in that moment, I didn't know whether to feel relief or a fresh wave of crushing disappointment. Was it all just gone? Erased? Or was he just that good at hiding it? He slid out of his bunk, grabbed some clothes, and headed towards the bathroom. The door clicked shut again. I let out a slow, silent breath. He was good. Or he genuinely didn't care. The thought stung, even though it was probably the safer option. The rest of the morning was a blur of forced normalcy. Breakfast in the noisy mess hall, the clatter of trays, the smell of burnt toast and watery coffee. I sat with my usual group, forcing myself to participate in the light-hearted banter, laughing at jokes I didn't quite hear. Every cell in my body was on high alert, scanning, searching. Noah was at a table across the room with his usual crowd. Liam, Sam, Chloe, the popular kids, the ones who seemed to glide through school effortlessly. He was laughing, animated, his dark hair still a little disheveled, but otherwise completely composed. Not a trace of the intimate, vulnerable boy who had held me so close just hours ago. Our eyes met once across the room, just for a moment. He was mid-laugh, gesturing wildly at something Liam had said. His gaze flickered to mine, and again, nothing. No acknowledgement. It was like we were strangers again. It was exactly what I should have wanted. What I did want, rationally speaking. But it felt like a punch to the gut. The abruptness of it. The complete disconnect. Was it all just a dream? Had I imagined the tenderness, the shared breathless moments? No, I knew it was real. My body still thrummed with the aftershocks. The day's activities were a blur of history and nature. We were at a conservation park that also had some old colonial buildings. First, a guided tour of a historical mansion, then a nature walk through a muddy trail. It was designed to be educational and team building, but all I could focus on was Noah, or rather, trying not to focus on him. He was often near, thanks to the group rotations. During the mansion tour, we were in the same small group, huddled around Mrs. Albright as she rattled off facts about ancient farming techniques. I could feel his presence, a magnetic pull I couldn't ignore, even if he was 2 people away, pretending to be utterly engrossed in a chipped ceramic pot. Every time he shifted, every time he spoke, my senses sharpened. I noticed the way his voice had a slight rasp when he was tired, the way his hands absently fiddled with the zipper on his jacket. Small details that, until last night, I hadn't really paid attention to. Now they were imbued with a secret significance, a code only I understood. At one point, as we were moving from one room to another, the corridor was narrow and crowded. I felt a brush against my arm. It was him, a brief, fleeting contact as we squeezed past each other. Nothing overt, nothing anyone else would notice. But for me, it was an electric shock. My breath hitched. I risked a quick glance. He didn't look at me. He just kept moving, his face a mask of polite interest in the tour guide's monologue. My heart was doing acrobatics. Was it accidental, or was it something? A tiny signal in the vast noise of our unspoken agreement? I couldn't tell. And the ambiguity was torture. During the nature walk, it was even harder to avoid him. We were paired up for a scavenger hunt, thankfully not with each other, but our paths kept crossing. I was with Liam, of all people, who spent the entire time complaining about the mud and trying to trip me with fallen branches. Noah was with Chloe, giggling and pointing out various ferns. They looked like a couple. A normal, attractive, perfectly straight couple. My chest tightened. I felt a surge of something ugly, jealousy, confusion, self-loathing. What was I doing? This was insane. I was insane. He was probably straight, and last night was just an experiment, a drunken mistake, a moment of weakness for him, and a moment of utter foolishness for me. I tried to tell myself that, tried to rationalize it, compartmentalize it, shove it into a dark corner of my mind, and forget it ever happened. But it was impossible. The memory was too potent, too real. It had changed something fundamental within me. By lunchtime, my head was throbbing. The constant vigilance, the mental gymnastics of pretending everything was fine, while simultaneously dissecting every microscopic interaction, was exhausting. I just wanted to go home, lock myself in my room, and replay every second of last night until I understood what it meant. We had free time after lunch, which meant we could either hang out in the common room or go back to our cabins for a bit. Most people gravitated to the common room to play board games or charge their phones. I pretended I needed to grab my history textbook for the evening's study session and headed for our cabin. It was blissfully quiet. The bunk beds were neatly made, or at least pulled into some semblance of tidiness. The bags mostly stowed away. I sat on my bottom bunk, not bothering to retrieve any book, just staring blankly at the wall. My mind was a whirlwind. A few minutes later, the door creaked open. My stomach dropped. Noah. He walked in, looking surprised to see me. "Oh, hey," he said, a casualness in his voice that felt like a slap. "Thought I'd grab my hoodie. It's getting chilly." He walked towards his bunk, which was just a few feet away from mine. I held my breath, trying to look nonchalant, as if I hadn't been obsessing over his every move for the past 6 hours. He rummaged in his bag, pulled out a gray hoodie, and started to put it on. His back was to me. "So the mansion was interesting," I managed to blurt out, just to fill the silence. It sounded lame even to my own ears. He turned, the hoodie half on, one arm still caught in the sleeve. "Yeah, pretty dusty." He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You looked like you were about to fall asleep during Mrs. Albright's lecture on agrarian societies." My heart hammered. He had noticed me. He had been looking at me. "Hard not to," I said, a nervous laugh escaping me. "All those dates blur together." He chuckled, a low, easy sound that sent shivers down my spine. He finished putting on his hoodie, then hesitated, his gaze landing on me. And this time, it wasn't a blank stare. It held something. A question. A memory. Something unspoken. A thread connecting us across the small space. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. The moment of reckoning. "About last night," I started. The words barely a whisper, my voice cracking slightly. He cut me off, softly. "Cam," he said, his voice equally low, almost urgent. He glanced towards the door, then back at me. "Look, we probably shouldn't talk about it here. Or, anywhere where people can hear." The relief that he acknowledged it, that it wasn't just a figment of my imagination, was immediate and immense. But it was quickly overshadowed by the renewed sense of secrecy, the very real danger of discovery. "Right," I managed, my voice still shaky. "Yeah, I know." He nodded, his gaze serious, intense. "It was unexpected." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, unexpected." He took a step closer, just one small step, but it felt like the world tilting on its axis. "Are you okay?" The question was simple, but it held so much unspoken weight. Was I okay with what happened? Was I regretting it? Was I confused, scared, exhilarated? All of the above, Noah. All of the above. "I don't know," I admitted, honestly, my voice barely audible. "Are you?" He looked away then, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I was quickly learning to associate with him. "It's a lot, right?" "Yeah," I agreed, almost too quickly. "A lot." The air between us crackled, thick with unsaid words, with lingering touches and hushed breaths. He looked back at me, his eyes searching mine. "We need to be careful, Cam." "I know," I said, my gaze dropping to my hands, which I was twisting in my lap. "I know." The word forbidden flashed in my mind again, a burning brand. It was... He paused, searching for the right word. Good, but complicated. My head snapped up. Good? The single word was a question, a plea for validation. Had it been good for him, too? Or was he just being polite? He offered a small, hesitant smile, a genuine one this time, not the blank facade he'd worn all morning. "Yeah, Cam, It was good. My heart soared, a ridiculous, giddy flight that defied all the fear and anxiety. Good. He thought it was good. But then his face clouded over. But still, complicated. We're here on a school trip, with everyone. He gestured vaguely at the door. And everything else. Everything else hung in the air, loaded with unspoken implications. The fact that we were two guys, the fact that neither of us had ever, well, not like that, the fact that our lives back home, our friendships, our futures, were entirely separate. So, what does that mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, daring to push a little. He sighed, a heavy sound that seemed to carry the weight of the whole situation. He sat down on the edge of his bottom bunk, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. He looked suddenly vulnerable, like the boy who had crawled into my bed last night, not the confident, popular Noah from the mess hall. It means we need to pretend it didn't happen. For now. While we're here. And probably after. His voice was low, laced with a regret that echoed in my own chest. The words were like a cold shower, dousing the tiny flame of hope that had just ignited. Pretend it didn't happen. Erase it. Go back to being strangers. It was the sensible thing to do, the safe thing, the only thing, really. But it hurt. God, it hurt more than I thought possible. Oh, was all I could manage. My chest felt tight, a dull ache spreading through it. He looked up at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite decipher. Concern? Regret? A shared understanding of the impossible situation? I'm not saying I regret it, Cam, he said, as if sensing my disappointment. I'm really not. But we have to be smart about this. Both of us. Smart, I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Smart meant denying a part of myself that had just woken up. Smart meant putting this incredible, terrifying thing back in its box. Yeah, smart, he affirmed, his voice gentle but firm. We can't risk it, you know? Not here. Not with everything. I nodded, even though every fiber of my being wanted to protest, to demand answers, to pull him close again and feel that intoxicating closeness. But the fear was real. The consequences could be devastating. For both of us. Especially since we lived in a small town where rumors spread faster than wildfire, and judgment was often swift and harsh. Okay, I said, my voice thin. Okay, I get it. He held my gaze for a moment longer, a silent conversation passing between us, a shared understanding of the delicate tightrope we were walking. And then the moment was broken by the sound of footsteps approaching the cabin door and muffled voices outside. Noah immediately stood up, his face shifting back to that carefully neutral mask. I should go, he said, quickly, glancing at the door. Liam's probably looking for me to play cards. Right, I responded, equally quick, trying to mirror his sudden detachment. Yeah, cards. He grabbed his phone from his bunk, shoved it in his hoodie pocket, and was at the door in 2 strides. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, turning back to me one last time. His eyes met mine, and just for a fleeting moment, I saw it again. The warmth, the memory, the unspoken connection. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone in the quiet cabin, the scent of his hoodie still lingering faintly in the air. I slumped back onto my bunk, burying my face in my hands. It was over. Before it had even really begun. That's what he wanted. That's what he implied. Back to normal. Back to the way things were. But how could things ever be normal again? How could I unfeel what I had felt? Unknow what I now knew about myself, about him, about the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of something more? The rest of the school trip was a strange, agonizing dance. We were in the same large group for meals, for evening talks, for some of the group activities. We sat across from each other at dinner, surrounded by the clamor of teenage chatter, occasionally making eye contact. Each time, it was a test of wills, a silent game of who will look away first. Usually, it was me. I just couldn't hold his gaze for long without feeling my cheeks flush and my stomach clench. He was good at it, though. The perfect illusion of indifference. He'd laugh, chat with Liam or Chloe, seem completely carefree, and every time I saw him like that, a fresh wave of doubt would wash over me. Maybe he really was over it. Maybe it was just a fleeting thing for him, easily forgotten, and I was the one left clinging to a memory, a moment of intimacy that meant nothing to him. But then there were the small, almost imperceptible moments that kept me guessing, that kept the fragile hope alive. Like during the evening campfire, when everyone was gathered around, singing off-key songs and telling silly stories, Noah was a few feet away, leaning against a tree, his face illuminated by the dancing flames. I was trying to focus on Mr. Davies's terrible guitar playing, but my gaze kept drifting to Noah. He was looking at me. I caught his eye, and for a split second, his expression was unguarded, a flicker of warmth, a hint of a smile, before he quickly glanced away. It was so subtle, so brief, that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But it felt real. Or later that night, back in the cabin, after everyone had settled down, the room plunged into darkness save for the emergency light in the hallway. I was trying to fall asleep, my mind still buzzing with the day's unresolved tensions. I heard a soft rustle from Noah's bunk below me, a pause, then a tiny, almost inaudible tap. It wasn't directed at anyone else. It was too soft, too deliberate. It was for me. I knew it. My heart leaped. I lay there, absolutely still, wondering what to do. Tap back? Say something? But what? And risk waking someone up? I didn't do anything. I just lay there, listening, my breath held tight in my chest. After a long moment, there was no other sound. No further tap. The silence stretched, heavy, and profound. What did it mean? Was it a reassurance? A question? A silent plea? Or just his knee accidentally hitting the metal frame? The ambiguity was a special kind of hell. It kept me constantly on edge, constantly searching for signs, for confirmation that I hadn't completely lost my mind. The next day, the final full day of the trip, was spent at a local amusement park. This was supposed to be the fun part, the reward for enduring the historical tours and nature walks. But for me, it was just another stage for our elaborate, silent play. We were free to roam in small groups, so at least I wasn't forced into direct proximity with him. I stuck with Finn and Maya, riding roller coasters, eating greasy theme park food, and trying to act like a normal teenager. But every time we passed a group of kids, my eyes instinctively searched for Noah. I saw him queuing for the biggest roller coaster, the Goliath, with Liam and Chloe. They were laughing, jostling each other playfully. My stomach twisted with envy, not just of Chloe, but of their easy camaraderie, their ability to be so openly, joyfully themselves. I wondered if he ever thought about me, about last night when he was laughing with them. Later, I was walking past a row of arcade games, the cacophony of flashing lights and electronic beeps assaulting my senses. I saw him there, at a basketball shootout game, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to sink baskets. He was alone. My heart gave a jolt. This was it. A chance. I hesitated, my feet rooted to the spot. Should I go over? Say something? What would I even say? Hey, Noah, remember when we crossed a forbidden line and now my brain is soup? Probably not. Before I could decide, Liam and Sam appeared from around the corner, slapping him on the back. Noah, you're terrible at this game, man, Liam joked. Noah laughed, shrugging. I'm trying. It's rigged. They moved off together, heading towards the prize counter, completely oblivious to my presence just a few yards away. I sighed, a long, weary exhalation. It was always like this. Moments of potential connection, always interrupted, always slipping away. The weight of the secret, the silent burden, was becoming unbearable. It was like I was carrying a heavy stone in my gut, pressing down on everything else. As the evening approached, we gathered for our final meal at the park, burgers and fries. The general atmosphere was celebratory, but I felt a profound sense of melancholy. The trip was almost over, and with it, this strange, intense bubble where our secret existed. Soon, we'd be back in the familiar halls of school, back in our separate lives, where the pressure to pretend it didn't happen would be even greater. During the bus ride back to the conservation park, where we'd spend one last night before heading home, the exhaustion finally caught up with me. I leaned my head against the window, watching the darkened landscape fly by, listening to the murmurs of my classmates around me. Suddenly, a voice next to me. "Mind if I sit here?" My eyes snapped open. Noah. My entire body went rigid. He was standing in the aisle, looking down at me, a polite smile on his face. The seat next to me was empty, Finn having gone to sit with Maya further back. No, go ahead," I managed, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. He slid into the seat, settling in comfortably. The bus was dimly lit, and the other kids were mostly plugged into headphones or dozing. It felt incredibly intimate, dangerously so. "Tired?" he asked, his voice low just for me. "Yeah, long day," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You too?" He nodded, leaning his head back against the seat. "Definitely. The Goliath nearly made me puke." He chuckled softly. I smiled, a genuine one this time, for the first time all day. "You went on the Goliath? I thought you hated big drops." He shrugged. "Liam dared me. Couldn't back down." He paused, then turned his head slightly, so he was looking at me. His eyes were shadowed in the dim light, but I could feel their intensity. "You didn't go on it?" "Nah," I said. "Too much of a chicken. Plus, Maya wanted to ride the teacups for an hour." He let out another soft laugh, and the sound was like music. He looked so relaxed, so unguarded, and it was intoxicating. The barriers we'd erected all day seemed to be crumbling, slowly, gently, in the quiet intimacy of the bus ride. "So," he said, his voice dropping even lower, barely a whisper, "tomorrow, we head back." My heart sank. "Yeah, back to reality." He hummed in agreement. There was a silence then, not awkward, but heavy with unspoken things. I could feel the heat radiating from his arm, inches from mine. Every nerve ending in my body was acutely aware of his presence. "Cam," he said, breaking the silence, his voice almost hesitant, "about what we talked about this afternoon." I braced myself. Here it came, the final, definitive push to sever any lingering connection. "I meant what I said about being careful," he continued. "We really do need to be, but I also meant what I said about not regretting it." My gaze snapped to his. His eyes were sincere, holding mine firmly. "I don't regret it either," I confessed, the words tumbling out before I could censor them. It felt so good to finally say it out loud, to have it acknowledged. A small smile touched his lips, a genuine one that reached his eyes. "Good." He reached out, his fingers brushing against my arm. A light, almost accidental touch, but it was enough. It was everything. It was a reaffirmation, a silent promise in the face of all the complications. My skin tingled where he had touched me. "So, what does that mean?" I whispered, daring to ask the question again, hoping for a different answer this time. He pulled his hand back, though his gaze remained fixed on mine. "It means it was real, and it meant something." He paused, a troubled look clouding his features. "But it also means we have to figure out what that something is and how to deal with it without blowing up our lives." "Blowing up our lives," I repeated, the phrase hanging between us, heavy with unspoken fears and desires. "Yeah, exactly," he said, nodding slowly. We're not home yet, Cam. One more night. We need to get through that first. And then we'll figure it out. His words, while still guarded, offered a glimmer of hope. Figure it out. It wasn't a definitive ending, not a dismissal. It was a continuation, a challenging, terrifying, exhilarating promise for the future. The bus rumbled on, carrying us closer to the cabin, closer to the final night of the trip. The air between us was still thick with the weight of our secret, but now it also held the fragile, precious possibility of something more. And for the first time since I'd woken up this morning, drowning in panic and uncertainty, I felt a tiny hopeful stir in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, this forbidden thing wasn't destined to stay a secret forever. Maybe, just maybe, we could actually figure it out. Coming back from that trip felt like I was being pulled apart, stretched between two completely different realities. On one side, there was the blurry, intense haze of those nights with Alex, the quiet confessions, the unbelievable closeness. On the other, there was the blindingly bright, harsh glare of regular school life, where everything was supposed to be normal, where Alex was Mr. Davies, my English teacher, and I was just Cameron, a senior, trying to make it through the year. The first day back in school was a nightmare of forced smiles and carefully averted gazes. Every time I saw Alex in the hallway, and I saw him way too often, it seemed like the universe was playing a cruel joke. My heart would do this weird somersault. It wasn't just a crush anymore, not by a long shot. This was something deeper, something that had burrowed its way right into my chest and taken root. When he'd walk by, usually surrounded by other teachers, talking about lesson plans or whatever, our eyes would lock for just a fraction of a second. It was enough. Enough to convey a whole conversation of, "Are you okay?" and "This is impossible," and "I miss you." His expression was always a careful blank slate for everyone else. But for me, I could read the subtle tension around his jaw, the slight flicker of something, regret, concern, or maybe just the same overwhelming feeling I was drowning in. I tried to act normal. I really did. Laughed at my friends' stupid jokes, pretended to be interested in the upcoming basketball game, even managed to ace a pop quiz in history. But underneath it all, there was this humming tension, like a live wire running through my veins. Every time a door opened, every time someone walked past my locker, I braced myself. For what? I wasn't entirely sure. For discovery? For a sign that it was all a dream? The hardest part was being in his class. English, my favorite subject, suddenly became an exercise in torture. I'd sit there, pretending to take notes, while every fiber of my being was screaming. My gaze would drift to him, standing at the front of the room, explaining symbolism in Shakespeare. He looked so put together, so teachery. Too tall, maybe, too handsome, definitely, with that quiet intensity that usually drew me in. Now it just made me ache. I'd catch him looking at me sometimes, just for a moment, when he thought no one else was paying attention. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible glance, but it felt like a jolt straight to my system. A secret shared, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible situation we were in. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. One afternoon, a few days after we'd returned, I saw him leaving the school building alone. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a stupid, impulsive thought, but I knew I had to talk to him. Just for a second. Just to make sure it hadn't all been a figment of my imagination. I waited until his car was out of the parking lot, and then I sprinted to my own beat-up sedan, starting it with trembling hands. I didn't have a plan, just this desperate need to connect. I drove aimlessly for a bit, then, on a sudden instinct, turned towards the main road that led to the small coffee shop he sometimes mentioned. And there he was, sitting by the window, a book open in front of him, a steaming mug of something beside it. He looked different outside of school, less formal. The blazer was gone, replaced by a dark, soft-looking sweater that made him seem softer, more approachable, but still utterly out of reach. I parked a block away, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. What was I even doing? This was insane. I couldn't just walk in there. What would I say? Hey, remember that forbidden thing we did? My stomach twisted, but I couldn't drive away either. I just sat there, watching him, feeling like a stalker, but also feeling this undeniable pull. After about 20 minutes of internal debate, he looked up, as if sensing my gaze. His eyes scanned the street, and then, for a split second, they landed on my car. My heart leaped. Had he seen me? I hunched down slightly, feeling ridiculously childish. He didn't react, just went back to his book, but I swore there was a slight pause before he did. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated. It was a text. An unknown number. Don't. Not here. Not ever. My breath hitched. It had to be him. I hadn't given him my number. Had he gotten it from the school roster? The thought was both alarming and strangely comforting. He cared enough to warn me. He saw me. I texted back immediately, forgetting all caution. I just needed to see you. A beat of silence. Then another message. This is dangerous, Cameron, for both of us. I know, I typed, my thumbs clumsy. But what about what happened? Was it real? There was a longer pause this time. My chest felt tight, waiting for his response. I imagined him, sitting in that coffee shop, his brow furrowed, contemplating his reply. Finally, the words came. It was real, more real than anything, maybe. But we can't let it be. Do you understand? My vision blurred a little. More real than anything. That phrase echoed in my head, a bittersweet melody. It confirmed everything I felt, but also underlined the impossibility. No, I texted back honestly. I don't understand how it can just stop. It has to, he replied, the words stark. For your future, for mine. I didn't reply. What could I say? He was right, of course. My rational brain knew it, but my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I watched him finish his coffee, pay, and walk out of the shop, his head down, not looking my way. He got into his car and drove off. I stayed there until the last faint glimpse of his car was gone, feeling utterly, profoundly alone. The next few weeks were a brutal test of endurance. We fell into a pattern of silent communication in the classroom. The subtle eye contact, the way his voice seemed to deepen just a fraction when he called on me, the almost imperceptible nod when I got a particularly difficult answer right. It was a tightrope walk, and I felt like I was constantly on the verge of falling. Every time I saw him, the yearning was a physical ache. Every time he looked away, it was a stab of doubt. My friends started to notice I was off. "You're distracted, dude," Mark said one day at lunch, nudging me with his elbow. "Dreaming about some girl?" I forced a laugh. Something like that. The lie felt sour on my tongue. "Or maybe you're just stressed about college applications," Sarah offered, always the sensible one. "Yeah, that's it," I agreed too quickly. "Just a lot on my mind." It was a plausible excuse, but I could tell they weren't entirely convinced. My grades were still good, but my focus wasn't where it should be. I was living for those fleeting moments of connection, analyzing every glance, every word, trying to find a hidden meaning, a flicker of hope that he wasn't really trying to shut me out entirely. One Thursday, after an especially intense English class where we'd discussed forbidden love in literature, irony, right? I felt a sudden, uncontrollable urge to break the silence. I knew it was risky, but the distance was killing me. After school, instead of going straight to my car, I lingered near the faculty parking lot, pretending to tie my shoe. My heart was a drum solo in my chest. He appeared a few minutes later, briefcase in hand, a slight frown on his face as he scanned the empty lot. He probably thought he was alone. As he passed my car, I straightened up. "Mr. Davies?" My voice came out a little shaky. He stopped, his shoulders stiffening imperceptibly. He turned, his expression carefully neutral. "Cameron, what can I help you with?" His voice was low, professional, but I could hear the tightness beneath it. I just had a question about the essay for next week." I lied, fumbling for an excuse. He nodded slowly. Right. What about it? He didn't move closer, kept a respectable distance. I swallowed. It's about it's about the theme of sacrifice. Like, what if the sacrifice isn't something obvious? What if it's sacrificing your own happiness for someone else's perceived well-being? His gaze sharpened, cutting through my flimsy excuse. He knew exactly what I was talking about. His eyes, usually so composed, held a depth of conflict I hadn't seen since the trip. That's a very insightful question, Cameron, he said, his voice even lower now, almost a murmur. Sometimes the greatest sacrifices are the ones no one ever sees, the ones made in silence. He paused, then took a small, hesitant step closer. But sometimes, Cameron, the sacrifice isn't truly for the other person's well-being. Sometimes it's just fear, fear of consequence. And sometimes both parties end up losing something invaluable. My breath hitched. This was more than just an academic discussion. This was him, talking to me, truly talking. So, is it worth it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The sacrifice? He closed his eyes for a brief moment, a fleeting gesture of pain that no one else would ever have noticed. When he opened them, they were clouded with something akin to sorrow. That's the question, isn't it? He said, his gaze fixed on mine. Only you can decide what's worth sacrificing, Cameron, and what's worth fighting for. He looked around quickly, as if afraid someone might appear. Now, about the essay, make sure your thesis is strong and support your points with clear textual evidence. His voice had returned to its professional tone, but there was a tremor there, just barely discernible. He gave a curt nod and continued walking towards his car. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching him go. His words were a confusing mix of encouragement and a warning, an invitation and a dismissal. He hadn't said we couldn't fight for it. He'd just said it was my decision. It felt like a tiny crack in the wall of silence he'd built around us. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words replayed in my head. More real than anything, maybe. And only you can decide what's worth sacrificing and what's worth fighting for. It was a puzzle, and I was desperate to solve it. I knew the risks. I wasn't naive. The age difference, the student-teacher dynamic, the societal disapproval. It was all there, a massive, looming monster. But the feeling, the raw, visceral connection I felt with him, that was something I'd never experienced before. How could I just turn that off? The next day, I found a way to leave a small, folded note on his desk when his classroom was empty. It was simple. Just 2 words. I choose. I spent the rest of the day in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. Had he seen it? What would he do? Would he be angry? Would he respond? I felt like a teenager with a secret crush, which, in a way, I was. But the stakes were so much higher. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. The unknown number. What do you choose? My heart leaped. He'd responded. He hadn't shut me down. I choose to fight, I typed, my fingers flying across the screen. For this. For us. There was a long silence, longer than before. I chewed on my lip, my stomach churning. Had I gone too far? Had I scared him off? Then, finally, meet me tomorrow, after school, the old bookstore on Elm Street, 6 o'clock. Don't tell anyone. Relief washed over me, so potent it made my knees weak. He wasn't pushing me away, he was engaging. This was it. This was our next step, whatever that might be. The bookstore was a quiet, dusty place, filled with the scent of old paper and forgotten stories. It was the kind of place Alex would love, I realized, the kind of place we could easily get lost in, blend into the background. I arrived at 5:55, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I pretended to browse, pulling a worn copy of Wuthering Heights from a shelf, my eyes darting towards the door. He walked in exactly at 6, looking just as nervous as I felt. He was wearing the same soft sweater as before, and a pair of glasses perched on his nose, which made him look even more approachable. Less like a teacher, more like Alex. Our eyes met, and in that instant, the distance, the school, the rules, it all faded away. There was just the two of us, standing in a quiet corner of a forgotten bookstore, about to step into something forbidden and terrifyingly beautiful. He walked over to the section I was pretending to browse, pulling out a book on classical poetry. "Finding anything interesting?" he asked, his voice low, a little strained. Yeah," I mumbled, still clutching my copy of Wuthering Heights. "Just trying to decide if Catherine and Heathcliff were really in love or just obsessed." He gave a faint, wry smile. "A timeless debate. Sometimes the lines blur, don't they, between passion and possession." He put his book back. "Listen, Cameron, we need to talk. Properly." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "I know." He led me to a small, almost hidden cafe area at the back of the store, usually empty at this time of day. We ordered 2 teas, our hands brushing accidentally as we reached for the same sugar packet. That small touch sent a jolt through me. Once we were settled at a secluded table, his gaze became intense, serious. "What you said in your text about fighting for this, what does that mean to you?" I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "It means I don't want to pretend those nights didn't happen," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It means I don't want to go back to being just a student to you, not after everything." I looked him directly in the eyes. "It means I care about you, Alex, a lot. And I think you feel something too, otherwise you wouldn't be here." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, a gesture of weariness that tugged at my heart. "You're right," he admitted, his voice raw. "I do. More than I ever thought possible. And that's exactly why we can't do this." My heart sank. "So you're saying you want to just forget it?" He shook his head vehemently. "No, that's not what I'm saying. How could I forget? You have no idea what those nights meant to me. What you mean to me." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his gaze desperate. "But Cameron, think about the reality. I'm your teacher. You're still in high school. This isn't just a forbidden romance out of a novel. This is my career, my reputation. And more importantly, it's your future. If anyone found out, it would destroy everything." "I know," I insisted, my own desperation rising. "But what if we're careful? What if no one finds out? We could just see each other sometimes. Talk. It doesn't have to be anything public." He sighed, a long, weary sound. "That's a dangerous fantasy, Cam. Secrets like this have a way of getting out. And the closer we get, the harder it will be to hide. The more we stand to lose." He looked away, staring out the window at the darkening street. "I've thought about nothing else since the trip, about how irresponsible I was, how completely captivated. It wasn't fair to you. It wasn't fair to either of us." "Don't say it wasn't fair to me," I pleaded, reaching across the table, my hand hovering just inches from his. "I wanted it. I still want it. I've never felt like this before, Alex, and I don't think I ever will again." He finally turned back to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of tenderness and profound sadness. He slowly reached out and took my hand, his fingers warm and firm around mine. The contact was electric, a confirmation of everything unspoken. "Cameron," he said, his voice husky, "you're young. You'll feel many things, for many people, and you deserve to explore those feelings without this kind of shadow hanging over you, without risking your academic record, your reputation, your peace of mind." "But what about your peace of mind?" I challenged gently. "Are you really going to be at peace if we just pretend none of this happened? If we just cut it off?" He squeezed my hand, his thumb stroking the back of my knuckles, sending shivers up my arm. "No," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "No, I won't. That's the problem. I don't think I can either, and that scares the hell out of me." He closed his eyes again, leaning his head back against the wall. "This is not who I am, Cameron. I'm supposed to be the responsible one, the adult. I'm supposed to protect you, not complicate your life like this." "You're not complicating it," I said fiercely. "You're making it real. You're making me feel things I didn't even know existed. How is that complicated?" He opened his eyes, a small, fragile smile touching his lips. "Because real feelings, when they go against everything they're supposed to, they are complicated, Cam. They're dangerous. They have consequences." He squeezed my hand again, then gently pulled his away, breaking the physical connection, but the warmth lingered. "Okay," he said, taking a deep breath, his decision etched on his face. "Okay. If you're really willing to take this risk, then we need to be incredibly careful, more careful than you can imagine." A wave of relief, so strong it nearly buckled me, washed over me. He wasn't saying no. He was saying maybe. He was saying we. "I am," I affirmed, my voice ringing with certainty. "I'm willing." He looked at me, a long, searching gaze that seemed to peel back all my layers. "This won't be easy," he warned. "It'll be stressful. We'll have to lie, to hide. We'll live in constant fear of being discovered. And if we are, it could ruin both our lives." "I understand," I said, even though I knew I probably didn't fully comprehend the magnitude of what he was saying. How could I? I was just a kid, head over heels for the first time. He nodded, a weary acceptance settling over him. "Okay then. Our communication has to be limited to this phone number. No school email, no social media, nothing that could be traced back to us, and only when absolutely necessary. We can't text about anything that would incriminate us, just short, innocuous messages. If we need to talk, truly talk, it has to be face to face, away from anyone who knows us." "Okay," I agreed readily. "I get it. And these meetings," he continued, his voice firm, "they have to be rare. And in public places, like this, where we can blend in. Or places where no one would ever expect us to be. Never at our homes. Never in isolation. And for God's sake, if you ever suspect anyone is watching or getting suspicious, you tell me immediately. We shut it down. No questions asked." I listened intently, absorbing every word. The rules were strict, the precautions extreme, but it was a path forward. It was a way for us to exist, even if it was in the shadows. "I promise," I said earnestly. "I'll be careful." He leaned forward, his gaze softening, a hint of the warmth I remembered from the trip returning to his eyes. "Cameron," he whispered, "this is terrifying and exhilarating. I've never felt this way before, this pull. It's reckless. But I don't think I can stop myself." My heart swelled. To hear him admit that, to confess his own vulnerability, his own struggle, it made me feel like we were truly in this together. "Me neither," I confessed, a shaky smile on my face. "Honestly, I think I'd go crazy if we just tried to forget it." He managed a small, tired smile in return. "Well, let's hope we don't end up crazy, or worse." He checked his watch. "I should go. Can't be seen lingering too long. People notice things." "Okay," I said, a wave of sadness washing over me, already missing him, even though he was still right there. He stood up, and I followed suit. "Remember the rules, Cameron. Always." His eyes held a warning, but also a deep affection that made my chest ache. He squeezed my shoulder briefly, a fleeting touch that was gone almost before I registered it, but it lingered, a phantom warmth. Then he turned and walked out of the bookstore, melting into the evening crowd as if he were just another customer. I stayed for a long time after he left, watching the spot where he'd been, tracing the invisible lines of our unspoken agreement, The weight of secrecy was heavy, a tangible thing settling on my shoulders. It was a burden, yes, but it was also a shield, protecting something incredibly precious, something I was now committed to fighting for, no matter the cost. But the world had a way of reminding you that secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, rarely stayed hidden forever. The next week, my best friend Mark looked at me with an odd expression during lunch. "Hey, Cam," he said, taking a bite of his sandwich. "You know Mr. Davies, our English teacher?" My breath caught in my throat. "Yeah? What about him?" I tried to keep my voice casual, but my heart was suddenly pounding. "Well, he just seems different lately," Mark mused, oblivious to my internal panic. "Like he's got something on his mind, more than usual. He used to be pretty chill, you know? Now he seems kinda intense. And he's been looking at you a lot in class. Is he giving you extra help or something?" My blood ran cold. He'd noticed. Someone had noticed. The first crack in our carefully constructed wall. "No, not really," I lied, forcing a nonchalant shrug. "He just calls on me a lot, I guess, probably because I always answer his questions, trying to get my grade up." Mark shrugged, seemingly satisfied. "Fair enough. Just seemed a little weird, like he's got a favorite student or something." He went back to his sandwich, but the words hung in the air between us. A chilling premonition. I spent the rest of the day in a state of high alert. Every glance from a classmate, every casual remark, every teacher who walked past my locker felt like a potential threat. Mark's observation was innocent, but it was a stark reminder of how fragile our secret was, how easily it could be exposed, and how quickly the whispers could turn into something far more dangerous. The weight of secrecy had just grown heavier, and I knew this was just the beginning. I had chosen to fight, but I was starting to realize just how many battles lay ahead. And for the first time, a genuine, bone-deep fear settled in my stomach. Could we really pull this off? Or were we doomed to be discovered? Our forbidden love laid bare for all to see and judge. The air back in our hometown felt different, heavier than the crisp, wild freedom of the mountains. Every breath I took felt like it carried the weight of a secret, clinging to me like the damp earth after a rainstorm. The school trip was over, the magical bubble popped, and suddenly, Liam and I were back to being just two boys in a sea of other students, navigating the same old hallways, sitting in different classrooms, pretending that the nights we'd shared in that bunk bed hadn't rewritten the entire script of my life. I saw him every day, of course, in the quad, leaning against his locker, laughing with his friends. My stomach would do a somersault every single time, a mix of pure joy and absolute terror. Joy because he was there, alive and vibrant, and terror because what we had, what we felt, was still a whispered thing, a phantom limb that only we could feel. We'd developed this whole clandestine language, a glance that lingered a fraction too long, a shared smile across a crowded cafeteria, the way his hand might brush mine for a fleeting second when we passed in the corridor, a micro touch that sent electricity searing through me. It was thrilling, yes, but also utterly exhausting. The first week back was a blur of hyper-awareness. Every corner I turned, I expected to bump into him, and when I did, the adrenaline rush was immense. We managed a few quick, hushed conversations after school, usually by the bike racks or a secluded spot behind the gym. The fear of being seen was always present, a third party in our fragile exchanges. "You okay?" he'd ask me once, his voice low, his eyes scanning the empty lot around us. His gaze was always so intense, like he could see right into the mess of emotions swirling inside me. I shrugged, kicking at a loose pebble. "Yeah, just, this is harder than I thought it would be." He nodded, a sigh escaping him. "Tell me about it. Every time I see you, I want to just grab your hand or something." The "or something" hung in the air, loaded with everything we couldn't do. "Me too," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. The yearning was a physical ache. I remembered the warmth of his body next to mine, the easy comfort of his arm around me. Now, even a casual touch felt like a monumental risk. The hardest part was going home. My parents were, well, they were my parents. Loving, but traditional. The idea of me being gay had never, to my knowledge, even crossed their minds. I loved them, and the thought of disappointing them, or worse, making them confused or upset, was a heavy burden. I found myself becoming more withdrawn, spending more time in my room, lost in my thoughts, or texting Liam under my duvet late at night. Our texts were a lifeline, a secret garden where we could be ourselves. We'd talk about everything and nothing, about school, about stupid jokes, but mostly about each other and the space between us. One evening, my mom came into my room without knocking, finding me staring blankly at my ceiling, my phone hidden under my pillow. "Everything all right, Cam?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "You've been a bit quiet since you got back from the trip, and you're not usually one to mope in your room." "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine," I mumbled, trying to sound nonchalant. "Just tired, I guess. Lots of homework." She sat on the edge of my bed, her presence a sudden, jarring reality check. "You can tell me if something's bothering you, you know. I'm here." Her kindness, her genuine concern, made the lie feel even heavier. I swallowed hard, looking away. "No, really, I'm good." She sighed, sensing a wall she couldn't penetrate. "All right, but remember, secrets aren't good for you, honey. They weigh you down." She patted my leg and left, leaving me with her words echoing in my ears. Secrets aren't good for you. She had no idea how right she was. The weight was becoming unbearable. It wasn't just the fear of being caught. It was the dishonesty, the constant performance. I hated pretending with my friends, laughing at their jokes about girls, feeling a pang of guilt every time I didn't correct them. I hated the way I had to censor myself, to reshape my entire being to fit into a mold that no longer felt right. Liam felt it too. I could see it in his eyes, the underlying tension, the way he'd clench his jaw when someone made a passing comment about not being a sissy. He was usually so easygoing, so carefree, but now there was a guardedness about him that mirrored my own. One Tuesday, after a particularly grueling day of pretending, we met at the old, disused skate park on the edge of town. It was our designated safe spot, far enough from prying eyes, nestled between overgrown trees and crumbling concrete ramps. "I can't do this anymore, Cam," Liam blurted out almost as soon as he saw me, his voice tight with frustration. He paced back and forth, kicking at a loose piece of gravel. My heart seized. "Do what? What do you mean?" The worst-case scenario immediately sprang to mind. He's ending it. He can't handle it. He's realized it was just a moment, a trip fantasy. He stopped, turning to face me, his hands running through his messy hair. "This, hiding, it's killing me. Every time I see you, I want to just scream it, you know? Tell everyone." He looked around as if expecting someone to magically appear and hear him. A wave of relief washed over me, immediately followed by a fresh surge of fear. "Tell everyone? Liam, are you insane? What about your parents? What about school? People here?" I trailed off, the unspoken threat of homophobia hanging in the air. He ran a hand over his face. I know it's crazy, but what's the alternative? We just exist like this forever? Sneaking around, living a lie? That's not a life, Cam. Not for me." His voice was raw, etched with desperation. His words struck a chord deep within me. He was right. This wasn't sustainable. But the thought of coming out, of making our relationship public, was terrifying. I imagined the whispers, the stares, the judgment. Our town wasn't exactly a beacon of progressive thought. "What do you propose then?" I asked, my voice shaky. "We just hold hands in the cafeteria tomorrow? Put a sign on our lockers?" The sarcasm was a defense mechanism, a way to deflect from the monumental fear gripping me. He stopped pacing and sat heavily on a concrete ledge, looking utterly defeated. I don't know, Cam. That's the problem. I just know I don't want to keep hiding you. I don't want to keep hiding us. He looked at me then, his eyes pleading, full of a pain that mirrored my own. Don't you want to stop hiding too? His question cut through my fear, striking at the core of my desire. More than anything, I wanted to be free. I wanted to be able to look at Liam, really look at him, without fear. I wanted to tell the world that this incredible boy, this person who had cracked open my world and shown me what true connection felt like, was mine. Yes, I admitted, my voice soft, almost lost in the rustling of the leaves above us. Yes, I do, more than anything. We sat in silence for a long time, the heavy weight of our unspoken future pressing down on us. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, a stark contrast to the churning anxieties within us. We don't have to tell everyone all at once, I finally said, a tentative idea forming in my mind. Maybe we tell someone we trust first, like a really good friend? Liam looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Who? I thought about it. My best friend, Maya, was fiercely loyal and had always been incredibly open-minded. She was always the one to defend the underdog, to speak up against injustice. Liam's closest friend, Sam, was a good guy, but a bit more reserved, and I wasn't sure how he'd react. Maya, I said. I think I could tell Maya. She's different. She'd understand. Liam considered it. Okay, that's a start. We don't have to do it together, right? Like, you tell her, I tell... Well, I'll figure out who to tell. And then maybe we can figure out the next step. It wasn't a grand plan, but it was a plan. A tiny crack in the dam of our secret. A way forward that didn't involve immediately jumping off a cliff. Okay, I said, a small smile finally breaking through. Okay, I can do that. The next day felt like walking a tightrope. I kept thinking about what I was going to say to Maya, rehearsing it in my head 100 times, each version sounding more awkward than the last. I tried to imagine her reaction: surprise, shock, hopefully acceptance. What if she was disgusted? What if she thought I was weird? The fears were insidious, creeping into every corner of my mind. After school, I found Maya at her locker, stuffing books into her backpack. Hey, I said, my voice sounding unnaturally high-pitched to my own ears. She looked up, a bright smile on her face. Hey, what's up? You look like you've seen a ghost. Can we talk? I asked, lowering my voice. Somewhere private? Her smile faltered slightly, replaced by a look of concern. Sure, what's going on? You're scaring me, Cam. We walked out of the main building, heading towards the sports fields, which were mostly deserted at this hour. My hands were clammy, my heart was pounding like a drum solo. Okay, I started, taking a deep breath. This is going to sound crazy. And you can't tell anyone. Not yet, anyway. She stopped, turning to face me fully, her expression serious. Cam, you know you can tell me anything. You're my best friend. Her unwavering loyalty gave me a small boost of courage. I looked at my feet, at the worn-out grass, then back at her. Okay, so, on the school trip, when we were staying in those cabins. I paused, searching for the right words. How do you summarize a world-shattering revelation in a few sentences? Well, I continued, something happened with Liam, and I realized something about myself, something big. Maya's eyebrows raised slightly, but she remained silent, patiently waiting. I think I'm gay, Maya, I blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush, a huge weight lifting from my chest the moment they were spoken aloud. And Liam and I were together. We have been since the trip. The silence that followed felt deafening. I braced myself for, I don't know what, judgment, disgust, confusion. Then a slow smile spread across Maya's face. It wasn't a mocking smile or a surprised one. It was soft, understanding, and incredibly warm. "Oh, Cam," she said, and then she pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh my God, I'm so happy for you." I blinked, completely caught off guard. I hugged her back, burying my face in her shoulder, a wave of unexpected emotion washing over me. You're not weirded out?" She pulled back, still smiling, a slight tear glinting in her eye. "Weirded out? Cam, no. Why would I be? This is amazing. You're finally being yourself. And Liam? He's great. I mean, I always kind of thought you two had a thing, even if I didn't know what thing it was." She chuckled softly. "You did?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Well, yeah. The way you two would look at each other, even before the trip, it was always a bit intense. I just figured you were really good friends, but, like, really good friends." She winked, and I laughed, a genuine, relieved laugh that hadn't come so easily in weeks. "Thank you, Maya," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not freaking out." "Never," she said, squeezing my arm. "And hey, your secret's safe with me, for as long as you need it to be." Her acceptance was a beacon, a small but powerful light in the daunting darkness that still surrounded us. It gave me hope, a sense of validation that I desperately needed. That evening, I texted Liam telling him about my conversation with Maya. "She was amazing, Elle. So supportive. It feels lighter, somehow." His reply came almost instantly. "That's incredible, Cam. I'm so happy for you." I told Sam too. He was surprised, but okay. Said he just wants me to be happy. Still, not exactly Maya-level enthusiasm, but I'll take it. "Progress," I texted back, a smile on my face. Slowly but surely. His next text was just a single word. Us. Yes, us. That's what this was all about. The conversation with Maya and Liam's update about Sam gave us a bit of breathing room. The secret felt less suffocating now that someone else knew, someone who truly cared. But the bigger challenge still loomed, telling our parents, facing the wider school, and truly owning our relationship. Days turned into weeks. Our stolen moments became a little bolder, a little less rushed. A quick handhold under a table in the library when no one was looking. A lingering hug in a deserted hallway. A whispered, "I miss you," when we parted ways. Each small act felt like a tiny victory against the overwhelming pressure of secrecy. But the pressure was still there. One afternoon, during lunch, I overheard some guys from the football team making homophobic jokes, their laughter loud and crude. My blood ran cold. Liam was on the team. What if they found out? What would they do to him? To both of us? The fear was a sharp, visceral punch to the gut. I found Liam after practice, still sweating, his hair damp. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice even. He smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Hey, you waited." "Yeah. Listen, I heard some stuff at lunch today. Some of the guys, they were making those jokes, the really nasty ones." I looked at him, my concern etched on my face. What if they find out about us?" Liam's smile faded. He leaned against the brick wall of the gym, scrubbing a hand over his face. "I know. It's always in the back of my mind. It's not just them. It's my dad. You know how he is. All about sports, being a man's man. He'd freak out." His dad was a formidable figure, a former athlete himself with a booming laugh and an unyielding expectation for Liam to follow in his footsteps. The thought of him reacting negatively to Liam's sexuality was genuinely terrifying. "My parents aren't much better," I admitted, looking down. "They're not outright homophobic, but they're definitely traditional. And I just don't know how they'd react to me being gay. It's not something we've ever talked about." We stood there in silence, the weight of our family's potential reactions suffocating us. It felt like we were standing at the edge of a precipice, staring down into an abyss of uncertainty. So what do we do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Do we just wait? Hope things change? Or do we keep hiding forever? Liam pushed off the wall, walked a few steps, then turned back to me, his eyes resolute. No, no more hiding. I can't do it. You said it yourself, Cam. This isn't a life. It's a half-life. He took a deep breath. I want to be able to be me, all of me, and I want to be able to be with you, openly. My heart fluttered with a mix of fear and exhilaration. You mean, tell our parents? Yeah, he said, his voice firm, though I could see a tremor in his hand. I think we have to. Not at the same time, necessarily, but soon. And then, we face whatever comes next, together. He held out his hand, and without hesitation, I took it. His grip was firm, reassuring. In that moment, surrounded by the looming shadows of the school building under the slowly darkening sky, it felt like the most courageous thing I'd ever done. Together, I echoed, squeezing his hand. Okay, when? This weekend, he said, his voice a little softer now, a hint of vulnerability creeping in. I'll tell my parents this weekend. You tell yours when you feel ready. But let's aim for this weekend. The next few days were a blur of nervous anticipation. I spent hours rehearsing what I would say, running through every possible scenario in my head. What if they disowned me? What if they were angry? What if they just pretended it wasn't happening? The uncertainty was agonizing. Saturday morning arrived, gray and overcast, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. My parents were in the kitchen, Mom making pancakes, Dad reading the newspaper. A typical Saturday morning, the kind that felt impossibly normal, impossibly fragile. Mom, Dad, I began, my voice cracking slightly. They both looked up, Dad lowering his newspaper, Mom turning from the stove. What's up, Cam? Dad asked, a slight frown on his face, probably picking up on my tense demeanor. I took a deep breath, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter. I need to tell you something important. My mom wiped her hands on a dish towel, her gaze softening as she sensed my distress. Of course, honey. What is it? It's about me, I said, my voice gaining a little more strength as I pushed past the initial terror. And who I am. I looked from her face to my dad's, trying to gauge their reactions. They were both listening intently, curiosity and concern etched on their faces. On the school trip, I continued, choosing to start there at the beginning of this seismic shift in my life. I realized something about myself. I fell in love with someone there. I paused, waiting. They exchanged a brief look. My dad's brow furrowed deeper, a hint of confusion. My mom's expression remained gentle, but I could see a flicker of understanding begin to dawn in her eyes. And that person is Liam, I finally said, taking another deep breath, the words tasting metallic on my tongue. Liam Davies, and he's a boy, and I'm gay. The silence that followed was immense, heavy, stretching on for what felt like an eternity. I stood there, utterly exposed, my heart pounding, waiting for the sky to fall. My dad was the first to speak. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Liam Davies, from your English class? The one who plays football? Yes, I confirmed, my voice barely a whisper. My mom stepped away from the stove, coming towards me. She reached out, taking my hands in hers. Her hands were warm, comforting. Are you sure, honey? She asked, her voice soft, laced with a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't quite decipher. This isn't just a phase. The phase question stung a little, but I understood where it came from. No, Mom, I said, looking into her eyes. I've never felt like this before. Not with anyone. This is who I am. My dad finally pushed back his chair, standing up. He walked over to the window, his back to us. Staring out at the gray sky, my stomach dropped. This was it. the disappointment, the anger. Then he turned around. His face was unreadable for a moment, and then he let out a long, shaky breath. "Well," he said, his voice a little gruff, but not angry. That's certainly a surprise, Cam." He looked at my mom, then back at me. Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. Not, "Are you confused?" or "What about your future?" but simply, "Are you happy?" "Yes, Dad," I said, a wave of relief washing over me, making my knees feel weak. "Yes, I'm really happy. With Liam." My mom squeezed my hands. "Then that's all that matters, sweetheart," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "As long as you're happy, we want you to be happy." She pulled me into a tight embrace, holding me close. My dad walked over, hesitated for a moment, and then put a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a hug, not yet, but it was a touch, a gesture of acceptance. "It's a lot to take in," he said, his voice still a bit rough. "But you're our son, Cam, and we love you." I buried my face in my mom's shoulder, a sob escaping me, tears streaming down my face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated relief. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a sudden burst of understanding, but it was acceptance. It was a beginning. Later that afternoon, I called Liam. "I told them," I said, my voice still a little shaky, but filled with a profound sense of lightness. "And?" he asked, his voice tight with anticipation. "They were surprised, but they said they loved me, and that they just want me to be happy." A long silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. "That's amazing, Cam. Really amazing." "What about you?" I asked. "Did you—" "Yeah," he said, his voice quieter now. "I told them too. It wasn't great, honestly. My mom cried. My dad, he just got really quiet. Said he needed time to process. He asked if it was just a phase. Again and again." My heart sank. "Oh, Liam, I'm so sorry." "It's okay," he said, though his voice sounded far from okay. "It's not a no, though, just a maybe. A lot of questions. He said we'd talk more tomorrow." He paused, but for a minute I thought he was going to explode. "Do you want me to come over?" I asked, suddenly desperate to be with him, to offer whatever comfort I could. "No," he said, a sigh escaping him. "Probably better if you don't. Not right now. He's going to need some space. We all are." He took another deep breath. "But hey, we did it, Cam. We actually did it." "Yeah," I said, looking out my window, the rain finally starting to fall. "We did." The coming out process wasn't a single event, but a series of ripples. Maya's quiet support, my parents' hesitant acceptance, Liam's parents' more difficult reaction. Each was a chapter in itself. The next week at school, things felt different. The air was still thick with unsaid things, but now I felt less like I was carrying a burden, and more like I was standing on the edge of a new beginning. Liam and I still didn't walk hand in hand in the hallways, but our glances were bolder, our smiles more genuine. We met at the skate park again that week, the rain having cleared, leaving the air fresh and clean. "So, what now?" I asked, looking at him, a sense of quiet determination settling over me. He reached out, taking my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles. This time there was no need to hide the gesture. The empty skate park was our sanctuary, but we both knew it wouldn't be for much longer. "Now," he said, his eyes meeting mine, a spark of fierce resolve in them. "We live. We live our lives. We figure out the rest as we go." He squeezed my hand. "It's not going to be easy, Cam. Some people are going to be jerks. Some people are going to judge. My dad, he's going to take time. A lot of time, probably." "Mine too, maybe," I admitted. "It's a big shift for them." "But," he continued, his voice firm, "we're not going to hide anymore. We're not going to pretend. We're going to be us. And if people don't like it, then that's their problem, not ours." His conviction was infectious. It resonated deeply with the burgeoning courage within me. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. This was just the beginning of a different kind of challenge, a different kind of fight. But this time, we weren't fighting alone or in the shadows. We had each other, and a small but growing circle of allies. I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. The forbidden aspect of our love hadn't vanished entirely. Society still had its prejudices, and our families still had their struggles to navigate. But the most forbidden part, the part that lived within me, the fear of accepting myself, had been conquered. "I love you, Liam," I whispered, the words feeling utterly right, utterly true as they escaped my lips. He tightened his arm around me. "I love you too, Cameron, more than anything." The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, breaking through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the skate park. It wasn't the end of a fairy tale, but it was the dawn of our own story. One we would write together, one day at a time, choosing our horizon with courage and love. The future was uncertain, messy, and definitely not easy, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was truly ours to claim, and that, in itself, was a victory.